got up and cheered, but then they immediately saw they weren't members of 30 Corps, they were actually Germans, coming to have a big battle again with them, so they had to get under cover. There was one famous guy who I can't remember the name, actually, it's annoying, but he actually commanded one battalion in the British Airborne Division who actually had an umbrella and wore a top hat. The only reason why, because weirdly to have an umbrella and wear a top hat, is because for his members to recognise who he is and where he is at all times. That's a interesting thing. So this is by basically kind of the last few days of the operation, and it failed completely. So I'll take you back to Toby. Yes, Toby?
So the officer you're mentioning there, his name was Digby Tatham Walter.
Yeah, that's the one, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, very famous thing. He apparently, he said when his men yelled up to him, what about, stop, because the shells are going to come and kill you all. He said, but what about the rain? He also rode around on a bicycle doing this occasionally. Very weird. But it inspired his men. That it was really an eccentrically British thing and it failed, but tragically, really. But it showed a lot of spirit in the army at that time, when a lot of people think it's kind of died. Another thing I did want to tap on before I move on to something else is a lot of people, for whatever reason, think that the German High Command were much better than the Allies. So, time to disprove this using Arnhem. Now, some people think, well, the Germans won Arnhem. How can you do that? Well, originally, von Titau, one of the commanders in the Netherlands, thought that they were actually going to land on one of the airfields, and that messed things up for a bit, because he just didn't do anything, pretty much, for a while. Wasn't an especially inspiring officer, and a lot of other German, high-ranking officers got things wrong. However, what they did rely on was kind of underneath that, the initiative of, battalion, regiment, company, divisional commanders, who are actually somewhat competent to kind of, form camp groups, string together any band of troops they really can to stop the British. And that's another point, is a lot of people think that those ranks in the German army, equivalently, were better than the British, opposite numbers. I would disagree with that again, because with this particular example, you've got to remember, despite the British High Command not making the most, educated decisions, perhaps, on Arnhem, they placed their men basically into a very awkward situation where the lower level commanders were effectively just trying to make the most of an incredibly difficult situation. So that's one of the reasons the Germans won. It's just because the British were already in a very handicapped situation.
Yeah.
And it's not like the Germans didn't make mistakes either, because one of the most famous of all is Grabner's. So there was in command of the 9th SS's the 9th SS Hohenstaufen, one of the SS divisions which had been obliterated in Normandy. They originally were actually going on a train. They literally packed up a lot of their equipment onto a train the day the British landed, so they were a bit underpowered, well, very underpowered, after all the losses and everything. But their reconnaissance battalion had craftily ignored the order because the junior officers thought the invasion was coming. So they actually, because in the German army, just bureaucracy and stuff, you had to have the units ready for transport. So he got his men to remove the wheels and guns from all of the armoured cars he had, so they could be kept, basically, for the upcoming battle. Now, he did this, so Victor Eberhard Grabner, who was a Knight's Cross recipient, For whatever reason, this really was one of the just most apocalyptic tactical transgressions I would say the German army made at a low level during the war, is for some reason he decided to order his reconnaissance battalion, him included, to charge across the Arnhem Bridge. Which, that's not good because the British had even got heavy machine guns up into the windows of the top level of the houses. They'd got mortars firing out of cellars, anti-tank guns also going out of anti-tank weapons also coming out of cellars.
Piats as well.
And then they ordered, so he charged, so the first few armoured cars, I think they were Pumas probably, SDKF Z234s if I remember correctly, charged across the bridge and avoided the chain of mines the British had laid through expert driving and just charged away into the distance so they couldn't really be shot at anymore. But the rest of them just got minced, destroyed. You had just standard soft-skin Opel Blitz trucks being forced across that bridge, and they were only armoured with sandbags, so, the Germans tried to get out of the cars, but it was too late, and there's one vehicle ground to a halt that I've heard of half-tracks then banging into the back of the other. I've heard of 2 half-tracks getting locked together on fire and then falling over the edge of the bridge onto the road below, and Eberhard Glavner actually tried to get out to kind of sort the debacle out, but in reality he just got killed, and most of the German bodies couldn't even be recognised because they'd been charged pretty much to a crisp by the end of it, so that was a real disaster for the Germans. But the Germans overall were winning. You had the King Tiger tanks, you had flamethrowers, they actually set quite a lot of the town on fire, which destroyed a lot of it, but it made the British have to retreat, vicious house-to-house fighting. And as, the British were forced back, they were still trying very hard, but the Polish were called in to try and, extract the British from this desperate situation. So Major Sosobolski, sorry if I've butchered that name, anyone who speaks actual Polish, actually was landed there, and the British after the war blamed him for a lot of the disaster, unfortunately, which it really wasn't his fault. So you ended up with him landing, having to fight off more German counterattacks with poor communications again, and they had to cross the river basically to rescue a lot of British soldiers, and the Germans were firing 2-centimetre flaks into the river, which are devastating weapons. And in the end, the losses were crushing. I think, only... Now this sounds like a lot, but it really isn't out of the whole division. 2,163 airborne men, 160 Poles, 75 of the Dorsetshire Regiment, and several dozen mixed kind of other men were evacuated from it, so the losses were pretty staggering. So Arnhem losses, you have overall, now this is for the entire, so 1,485 British and Polish troops were killed or died of wounds, and 6,525 became prisoners of war. It was a heroic battle, but in the end failed disastrously. So I will hand you back to Tim.
Right, thanks Toby. Yes, it did end in disaster for 30 Corps and the whole of the Allies, mainly because of lack of communication with the radio sets not working, and they were just very slow at everything. So thanks for watching, guys. That's been the end of episode 5, and so episode 6 will be on about quite an unknown one, really. I mean, yes, it's known, but unknown, as not really talked about as such is October 1944 with the Hurtgen Forest, the very, very dense wooded, landmined forest of Hurtgen. So thanks for watching, guys, have a good one, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye!